The storm had been relentless for 3 days when Ethan Sorenson finally reached the old hunting cabin his grandfather had built decades ago. And the last thing he expected to find inside was a pair of glowing amber eyes staring at him from the darkness. He froze in the doorway, rain streaming down his face, his hand instinctively moving toward the knife at his belt. The eyes didn't move. For a long moment, they simply watched each other, the sound of rain hammering the roof filling the silence between them. Then lightning flashed, and in that brief illumination, Ethan saw her. She was an orc. A woman, he realized, taking in the curve of her face despite the prominent tusks that jutted from her lower jaw. Her skin was a deep green, darker in the shadows, and her black hair hung in wet tangles around her shoulders. She was pressed into the corner of the cabin, making herself as small as possible, which seemed impossible given her broad shoulders and muscular frame. But what struck him most was the fear in those amber eyes. "Please," she said, her voice rough but steady. "I mean no harm. I will leave." She tried to stand, and that was when Ethan noticed the blood. It darkened her leather tunic on the left side, spreading from a wound he couldn't quite see. She swayed, catching herself against the wall, and he saw her jaw clench against what must have been considerable pain. "Wait," Ethan said, holding up his hands. "You are hurt." "I will manage," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, her legs buckled. Ethan moved without thinking, dropping his pack and crossing the small cabin in 3 strides. He caught her before she hit the floor, feeling the fevered heat of her skin even through her wet clothes. She was heavy with muscle, but he managed to ease her down gently, propping her against the wall. "Let me see," he said, reaching for her tunic. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Why would you help me?" It was a fair question. He had been raised on stories of orc raids, of savage warriors who showed no mercy. The war between their peoples had ended 5 years ago, but the wounds ran deep. Most humans would have run at the sight of her, or worse, tried to finish what her injury had started. "Because you are bleeding in my cabin," Ethan said simply. "And I am not in the habit of letting people die when I can help them." She searched his face, those amber eyes trying to read his intentions. Finally, slowly, she released his wrist and let her hand fall away. Ethan lifted the edge of her tunic carefully, revealing a deep gash along her ribs. The wound was angry and inflamed, but thankfully didn't look deep enough to have damaged anything vital. "What happened?" he asked, moving to his pack to retrieve his medical supplies. "Hunting accident," she said, too quickly. Ethan glanced back at her. "That looks like a sword cut." She said nothing, which was answer enough. He brought his supplies over and knelt beside her, cleaning the wound as gently as he could. She hissed in pain but didn't pull away, her hands curling into fists against the wooden floor. "You might have noticed I am an orc," she said through gritted teeth. "There are those who would kill me for sport. In these mountains," Ethan frowned, threading a needle, "there is nothing up here but wilderness. There are hunters, human hunters who do not care about the peace treaty. They came across my camp 2 days ago." She paused as he began stitching the wound. "I ran. I found this place yesterday. I thought it was abandoned." "It is, mostly," Ethan said, focusing on his work. "I only come up here a few times a year. My grandfather built it before he died." He tied off the last stitch and reached for bandages. "You were lucky. A little deeper and this would have been much worse." "Lucky," she repeated, and there was bitter humor in her voice. "Yes, I feel very fortunate." Ethan wrapped the bandage around her torso, trying not to notice the lean muscle beneath his hands, the way her breath caught with each movement. When he was finished, he sat back on his heels. "What is your name?" She hesitated again, as if even that simple piece of information was dangerous to give. "Kora, Kora," he repeated. "I am Ethan. And you are welcome to stay here until you are healed enough to travel. The storm should pass by morning." Her eyes widened slightly. "You would let me stay, an orc?" "You are a person who is hurt and needs help," Ethan said, standing to start a fire in the small hearth. "Everything else seems less important than that." He felt her watching him as he worked, building the fire with practiced efficiency. The cabin was small and simple, just one room with a hearth, a cot in the corner, a rough table and 2 chairs, and shelves that held basic supplies. It had been built for function, not comfort, but it had weathered the years well. Once the fire was crackling, Ethan hung his wet coat to dry and began unpacking his supplies. He had brought enough food for a week, planning to hunt and fish to supplement his stores. Now that plan would need adjusting. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Kora was silent for so long he thought she might not answer. "Yesterday morning." He nodded and pulled out some dried meat and hard bread, along with a small pot. "I will make something warm. You need food to heal. Why are you doing this?" The question burst from her like she couldn't hold it back any longer. "You should fear me, hate me. At the very least, you should drive me out into the storm." Ethan filled the pot with water from his canteen and set it over the fire to boil. "Should I?" "I am an orc," she said, as if he might have missed that fact. "My people killed humans. I have killed humans." "In the war?" he asked quietly. "Yes, so did I." He added dried vegetables and meat to the warming water, stirring slowly. "I was with the 3rd Infantry, stationed along the border for 4 years. I have killed orcs. Does that mean you should hate me?" She stared at him, and he saw confusion join the pain in her eyes. "I do not understand you." "The war is over," Ethan said. "It has been over for 5 years. I am tired of hating. I am tired of killing. I came up here to get away from all of that, to remember what peace feels like." He met her eyes. "I will not start the war again in my own cabin." The soup was simple but hot, and he brought her a bowl carefully. She took it with shaking hands, and he saw her pride warring with her hunger before hunger won. She ate slowly at first, then faster, and he quietly refilled her bowl twice before she finally set it aside. "Thank you," she said, the words seeming unfamiliar in her mouth. "You are welcome." Ethan made himself a bowl and sat at the table, giving her space. "How long have you been running?" "Since the attack." 2 days, maybe 3. Time becomes strange when you are bleeding and afraid. She leaned her head back against the wall, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. "I was traveling south, trying to reach the border settlements. There are some orc clans there, I heard, places where we might be welcomed. You were alone." "I have been alone for some time now." Something dark and painful crossed her face. "My clan cast me out 6 months ago." Ethan looked up from his soup. "Why?" "Because I spoke in favor of the peace," she said bitterly. "Because I said we should honor the treaty, that there had been enough death. The elders called me weak, said I had forgotten what it meant to be orc. They exiled me." "I am sorry," Ethan said, and meant it. She laughed, a harsh sound. A human apologizing to an orc. The world truly has gone mad. They fell into silence, broken only by the crackling fire and the rain against the roof. Ethan watched Kora from the corner of his eye, seeing her struggle to stay awake, her body demanding rest even as her wariness kept her alert. Finally, he stood and pulled a blanket from the shelf. "Take the cot," he said, bringing the blanket to her. "You need to rest properly." "Where will you sleep?" "The floor is fine. I have slept on worse." He had many times during the war. The wooden floor of a warm cabin was luxury compared to some of the places he had laid his head. Kora looked like she wanted to argue, but another wave of exhaustion washed over her, and she nodded. With his help, she managed to move to the cot, lowering herself down with a barely suppressed groan. Ethan spread the blanket over her and stepped back. "Ethan," she said as he turned away. "Yes." If I try to kill you in the night, it will be because the fever has taken my mind, not because I want to." He smiled slightly. "If you try to kill me in the night, I will assume exactly that." He settled on the floor near the fire, using his pack as a pillow, and listened to her breathing gradually slow and deepen. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, with the fire warm and the immediate danger past, Ethan felt something close to contentment. He had told her the truth. He was tired of war, tired of the hate that had consumed so many years of his life. If he could offer this one orc woman sanctuary for a few days, maybe that was a start toward something better. He fell asleep to the sound of rain and breathing, unaware that his life had just changed in ways he could never have anticipated. Morning came gray and quiet, the storm finally spent. Ethan woke to find Kora still asleep, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been the night before. He moved quietly, not wanting to disturb her, and slipped outside to assess the situation. The world was dripping and muddy, but the air smelled clean and fresh. He checked his snares, hoping to find something for breakfast, and was rewarded with 2 fat rabbits. He cleaned them by the stream that ran near the cabin, the cold water sharp and clear, then brought them back to prepare. Kora was awake when he returned, sitting up carefully on the cot. Her color was better, though pain still tightened her features. "How do you feel?" he asked, bringing the rabbits to the table. "Like I was stabbed and then ran through the mountains for 2 days, she said dryly. "But better than yesterday." "Good. The fever seems to have broken." He began preparing the rabbits for cooking. "You should rest as much as possible today. That wound needs time to start healing properly." "I should leave," Kora said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I have imposed enough. You can barely sit up," Ethan pointed out. "If you try to leave now, you will only hurt yourself worse. Besides, I could use the company. It gets quiet up here alone." She watched him work, and he could feel the weight of her gaze. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone harder, crueler?" "The humans I have known since the war ended have not been kind to orcs." Ethan began cutting the meat into portions. "The humans you have known were probably carrying the same wounds and losses we all are. War makes people hard. It makes them afraid, and fear turns to anger easily." He glanced at her. "But not everyone chooses to stay afraid. You are not afraid of me at all, are you?" There was curiosity in her voice and something else he couldn't quite name. "Should I be? You can barely move and I patched you up. I think if you wanted to hurt me, you would have tried by now." He put the meat on to cook, the smell soon filling the small cabin. "Besides, you have honest eyes. My grandfather used to say you can tell everything about a person from their eyes." "What do my eyes tell you?" He looked at her properly then, meeting those amber eyes directly. "That you are tired, that you have been hurt and not just in body. That you are trying very hard to figure out if you can trust me. And can I?" The question was soft, almost vulnerable. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "You can." They ate breakfast in a more comfortable silence than the night before, and afterward Ethan helped Kora back to the cot. He changed her bandage, noting with satisfaction that the wound looked cleaner already, with no signs of infection. "You have medical training," Kora observed as he worked. "I was a field medic in the army," he explained. "I learned quickly that knowing how to keep people alive was just as important as knowing how to fight. You were a healer and a warrior both, out of necessity." He secured the new bandage. "I did not particularly want to be either, but the war did not ask what I wanted." "What did you want?" she asked. Ethan sat back, considering the question. No one had asked him that in a long time. "Peace. A simple life. Maybe a farm of my own someday, though I am not sure I am ready to settle yet. What about you? What did you want before your clan exiled you?" "I wanted to be a hunter," Kora said, looking down at her hands. To provide for my people, to be respected. I was good at it, one of the best in my clan. But then the war ended and I saw what it had cost us. So many dead, so many families torn apart. I thought we should embrace the peace, find new ways to live. But my clan, they could not let go of the old hatreds. So they let you go instead. Yes. The single word carried so much pain. I have been wandering ever since, trying to find a place where I might belong. There are not many places that welcome a lone orc. That will change, Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. It has to. We cannot stay enemies forever. You have more faith than I do. Over the next few days, they fell into an easy routine. Ethan hunted and foraged while Kora rested and slowly regained her strength. In the evenings, they talked, sharing stories that gradually painted pictures of their lives. Ethan learned that Kora had 3 younger brothers she still thought about, that her favorite food was honey cakes, even though she hadn't had any in years, that she could track a deer through running water and hunt in complete darkness. Kora learned that Ethan had grown up on a farm before the war, that he still had nightmares about the battles he'd fought, that he carved small wooden figures when he couldn't sleep, and had a collection of them back in the small house he rented in the valley town below the mountains. On the 4th day, Kora insisted on getting up and moving around the cabin. Ethan hovered nervously, ready to catch her if she fell, but she managed a slow circuit without incident. "I cannot stay in bed forever," she said when he tried to protest. "I am going mad with boredom." "You are going to pull your stitches," he countered. "Then you will stitch me up again," she said with a slight smile that showed her small tusks. It was the first time he had seen her really smile, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. He found himself smiling back. "You are a terrible patient, and you are an overbearing healer." They stood there grinning at each other like idiots, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. By the end of the week, Kora was moving much more freely, though Ethan still made her rest often. She helped with small tasks around the cabin, preparing food and mending a tear in his coat with neat, precise stitches that put his own clumsy repairs to shame. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, watching her work. "My mother," Kora said, her voice softening. "She said a good hunter needed to know how to repair their own gear. She taught me all kinds of practical skills." "She sounds wise." She was. Kora's hands stilled. "She died in the war, a human arrow." Ethan felt the weight of that confession settle between them. "I am sorry." "Are you?" She looked up at him, and there was no accusation in her eyes, just genuine curiosity. "It might have been one of your people who killed her, maybe even you." "I am still sorry," Ethan said quietly. "I am sorry for all of it, every death, every loss on both sides. None of it should have happened." Kora studied him for a long moment, then returned to her sewing. "My mother would have liked you, I think. She always said the strongest warriors were the ones who chose mercy when they could have chosen violence." They spent the afternoon together, Kora sewing while Ethan carved a small figure from a piece of wood he'd been saving. It was meant to be a bird, though his skills were still developing. The comfortable silence between them felt natural, like they had been doing this for years rather than days. "Can I ask you something?" Kora said eventually. "Of course. Why did you really come up here, to the cabin?" Ethan kept his eyes on his carving, watching the wood peel away in thin curls. "I needed space to think. The town where I live, it is fine, but sometimes I feel like I am suffocating there. Too many memories, too many people who look at me and see only the soldier I used to be. Up here I can just be Ethan. Not Ethan the war veteran, not Ethan who has killed more men than he can count, just Ethan." "I understand that," Kora said softly. "Since my exile I have been no one, not part of a clan, not part of a community, just Kora wandering alone. Some days that freedom feels like the greatest gift. Other days it feels like the deepest loneliness. It does not have to be that way forever, Ethan said, finally looking up at her. You will find your place. Will I? She set down her sewing. Where does a lone orc woman belong in this world? The humans fear me, the orcs have rejected me. I am caught between, belonging nowhere. You belong here, Ethan said, the words coming out before he could think about them. Right now, in this moment, you belong here. Their eyes met and held, and Ethan saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. It was a look of longing so raw and honest that it made his heart ache. He wanted to reach out to her, to close the distance between them, but he held himself still. It was too soon, too complicated. She was an orc, he was human, and the world outside this cabin would never accept what he was beginning to feel. But in this cabin, in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. The next morning, Ethan woke to find Kora already up, standing by the window and looking out at the forest. The early light painted her green skin in shades of amber and gold, and he found himself staring at the strong line of her back, the graceful way she held herself despite her injury. Something wrong? He asked, sitting up. Hunters, she said quietly. I saw them in the distance, moving through the trees. Ethan was on his feet immediately, joining her at the window. Sure enough, he could see figures moving through the forest, at least 3 of them, carrying bows and spears. They were too far away to make out details, but they were clearly searching for something. They might just be hunting game, Ethan said, though he didn't believe it. Or hunting me, Kora said. If it is the same group that attacked me before, they will not give up easily. They see killing orcs as sport, as righteous work. Then they will not find you, Ethan said firmly. This cabin is well hidden and we will stay quiet until they pass. But the hunters did not pass. Over the next hour, they watched as the figures gradually worked their way closer, following some trail only they could see. Ethan's jaw tightened as he realized they were tracking Kora, following signs she had left in her desperate flight days ago. I have to leave, Kora said, turning from the window. I will lead them away from here. You are not healed enough to run, Ethan protested. And you are not leaving. Ethan, they will kill you if they find me here. If they think you are sheltering an orc, you will be seen as a traitor. I do not care what they think. I care, Kora said fiercely. You have been kind to me, kinder than any human has been in my memory. I will not repay that kindness by bringing death to your door. Ethan grabbed her shoulders, stopping her as she moved to gather her things. Listen to me. You are not going anywhere. I have not kept you alive this past week just to watch you get yourself killed now. He looked into her eyes, willing her to understand. I will deal with the hunters. You stay here and stay quiet. You cannot fight 3 men alone. I am not going to fight them, Ethan said. I am going to talk to them. Before she could protest further, he released her and grabbed his coat. He checked that his knife was secure at his belt, more for comfort than any real plan to use it, and headed for the door. Ethan, Kora called, and when he looked back he saw fear in her face. Not for herself, he realized, but for him. Be careful. He nodded and stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind him. The hunters were closer than he'd thought, emerging from the tree line even as he walked away from the cabin toward them. There were 3 of them, rough-looking men with hard eyes and well-worn weapons. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, raised his hand in greeting that was more threat than welcome. Morning, the man called. We are tracking dangerous game. An orc wounded came through here some days back. You seen anything? Just rabbits and deer, Ethan said evenly, stopping a good distance away. What is an orc doing this far into the mountains? That is what we aim to find out, the scarred man said. Probably a scout for a raiding party. We have been hunting it for days now. Trail leads right to this area. Well, you are welcome to search the area, Ethan said, gesturing broadly to the forest. But I have been here over a week and have seen nothing but wildlife. One of the other hunters, a younger man with nervous hands, spoke up. Trail leads right to that cabin behind you. That is my cabin, Ethan said, keeping his voice calm. And I assure you there is no orc inside, just my supplies and not much else. The scarred man studied him with calculating eyes. You will not mind if we take a look then, just to be sure. Actually, I would mind, Ethan said. That is private property and you have no authority to search it. Now, friend, the man said, his hand moving to his sword, we are not looking for trouble. But that orc is dangerous, and if you are hiding it, that makes you a traitor to your own kind. I am not hiding anyone, Ethan said, though the lie felt heavy on his tongue. And I am asking you, as one human to another, to respect my property and continue your hunt elsewhere. The tension stretched between them, the three hunters clearly weighing their options. Ethan kept his hand away from his knife, his posture non-threatening but firm. He had fought in the war, had faced down enemies far more frightening than these men, and he let that quiet confidence show. Finally, the scarred man spat on the ground. You seem mighty protective of an empty cabin. I am protective of my privacy and my rights, Ethan countered. The war is over. We have laws now, treaties. Or does that not matter to you? Laws, the man scoffed. Laws made by soft-hearted fools who have forgotten what orcs really are. Monsters, every one of them. They should have all been wiped out when we had the chance. Then it is a good thing the decision was not up to you, Ethan said coldly. Now I have asked you politely to move on. The next time I will not be so polite. The younger hunter shifted nervously. Come on, Garrick. He is right about the law. If we push this and he reports us, there will be questions. Garrick, the scarred man, glared at Ethan with pure hatred. This is not over. We will be watching these mountains, and if we find out you lied to us, we will be back. There is nothing to find, Ethan said. But you are welcome to waste your time. The hunters retreated, disappearing back into the forest, but Ethan could feel their eyes on him. He waited until they were well out of sight before returning to the cabin, his heart pounding now that the confrontation was over. Kora was standing just inside the door, her face pale. They will come back. Probably, Ethan agreed. Which means you cannot stay here. Pain flashed across her face. I know. I meant we cannot stay here, Ethan corrected. Both of us. We need to move, find somewhere safer. She stared at him. You would leave your cabin, because of me. It is just a cabin, Ethan said, though his heart squeezed at the thought of abandoning his grandfather's legacy. You are more important. You do not even know me, Kora protested. We have known each other barely a week. I know enough, Ethan said. I know you are brave and kind. I know you spoke up for peace even when it cost you everything. I know that you have been hurt and alone, and I will not let those men add to your suffering. He stepped closer to her. I know that I would rather leave this place than see any harm come to you. Kora's amber eyes shimmered with moisture. Why? Why do you care so much? Ethan opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. How could he explain what he barely understood himself? That somewhere in the past week, she had become important to him in a way that defied logic or reason. That when he looked at her, he didn't see an orc or an enemy, but simply a woman who made him laugh, who listened when he talked, who had suffered and survived and somehow still had gentleness in her. Because you matter, he finally said. To me you matter. A single tear traced down her green cheek, and before he could think better of it, Ethan reached up and brushed it away with his thumb. Her skin was warm and surprisingly soft, and she leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward the sun. Ethan, she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. They stood there, frozen in that moment, the space between them charged with possibilities neither dared to voice. Then Kora stepped back, breaking the spell. "Where would we go?" she asked, her voice thick. Ethan forced himself to think practically. "South, like you were originally planning. There are settlements near the border, places where the treaty is taken more seriously. We could make it there in a week if we travel carefully." "That is a long journey. Dangerous." "Less dangerous than staying here with those hunters watching." He began gathering supplies, his mind already planning the route. "We will leave tonight, travel under darkness when we can. Your injury should hold up if we take it slow." Kora watched him work, and he could feel the weight of unspoken words between them. Finally, she spoke. "You do not have to do this. You could tell them where I went after I leave. Save yourself." "I am not going to do that," Ethan said, pausing to look at her. "We are in this together now." "Both of us or neither of us?" "Together," she repeated, testing the word. A small smile curved her lips, showing her tusks. "I like the sound of that." They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Ethan packed supplies while Kora rested, gathering her strength for the travel ahead. He took only what they could carry, leaving most of his grandfather's things secured in the cabin. It hurt to leave, but he meant what he'd said. Some things were more important than a building, even one filled with memories. As evening fell, Ethan took one last walk around the cabin, saying a silent goodbye. When he returned, he found Kora standing outside, looking up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "Ready?" he asked. She turned to him and nodded. "Yes, thank you, Ethan, for everything." "Thank me when we reach safety," he said, adjusting his pack. "We have a long road ahead." They set off as full darkness fell, moving quietly through the forest. Ethan led the way, following game trails he knew well, keeping them away from the main paths where the hunters might be watching. Kora moved silently beside him, her hunter's skills evident despite her injury. They traveled through the night, stopping only briefly to rest. When dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they found a sheltered spot beneath a rocky overhang and made a cold camp, not daring to risk a fire. "How is your wound?" Ethan asked, helping her settle against the rock. "It pulls a bit, but it holds," Kora said. "Your stitching is good. High praise from someone who sews better than I do." She smiled at that, and they shared some dried meat and water before Ethan insisted she sleep. He took first watch, sitting at the edge of their shelter and looking out over the forest they had traveled through. Somewhere behind them, those hunters were probably still searching. The thought made his jaw clench. "Ethan," Kora's voice came softly from behind him. "Why are you really doing this?" "The truth." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun rise over the mountains. "Because I am tired of being afraid," he finally said. "Tired of letting fear dictate my choices. The war taught me to fear orcs, to see you as the enemy. But you are not my enemy, Kora. You are just a person trying to survive in a world that has been cruel to you. And maybe, if I can help you, if I can choose kindness over fear, then I can prove that the war did not break me completely. That I am still capable of being the person I wanted to be before all the killing started." When he looked back at her, Kora was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was alone," she whispered. "I thought there was no place in this world for someone like me. But then I found you." "You are not alone anymore," Ethan said. "I promise you that." They traveled for 6 more days, moving steadily south through the mountains and into the foothills beyond. It was hard travel, made harder by the need to stay hidden and the constant worry that the hunters might catch up to them. But they saw no signs of pursuit, and gradually, Ethan began to hope they had escaped. During the days when they rested, they talked more than they ever had at the cabin. The constant proximity and shared danger seemed to strip away the last barriers between them. Kora told him about her childhood in the orc clans, about the strict codes of honor and the constant pressure to prove her strength. Ethan shared memories of his family's farm, of his parents who had died while he was away at war, of the emptiness he had felt coming home to find everything changed. "Do you miss it?" Kora asked one afternoon as they sat overlooking a valley. "The farm?" "Sometimes," Ethan admitted. "Mostly I miss the peace of it, the simplicity. Plant seeds, tend them, watch them grow. There was something satisfying about that work. Honest." "You could do that again," Kora pointed out. "Find new land, start over." "Maybe," he said. "But farming is not something you do alone. You need help, family. I have no one left." He felt more than saw Kora's reaction to those words, a slight stiffening of her shoulders. "I understand that loneliness," she said quietly. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were calloused from years of hunting, strong and warm. She looked down at their joined hands in surprise, then slowly, carefully squeezed back. They sat like that as the sun moved across the sky, holding hands and watching the world below them, neither wanting to break the connection. That night, they made camp in a small cave they found tucked into a hillside. It was secure and hidden, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt safe enough to build a small fire. They cooked fresh rabbit he had caught, and the warmth of the food and fire seemed to ease some of the tension they had been carrying. "Only a few more days," Ethan said, checking his mental map of the region. "We should reach the border settlements by the end of the week." "And then what?" Kora asked, poking at the fire with a stick. It was a question Ethan had been avoiding thinking about. What would happen when they reached civilization? Would they go their separate ways? The thought made something inside him twist painfully. "Then we find you a safe place," he said. "Somewhere you can settle, maybe with one of the orc clans that live peacefully there." "And you?" Her eyes found his across the fire. "What will you do?" "I do not know," he admitted. "I suppose I will figure that out when we get there." Kora was quiet for a long moment. "You could stay," she finally said, so softly he almost missed it. "With me, I mean, if you wanted." Ethan's heart began to pound. "Kora." "I know it is foolish," she said quickly, not meeting his eyes now. "A human and an orc, it would never work. People would not accept it. I just thought, after everything we have been through together, maybe we could continue being together." "As friends," she added hastily. "Friends," Ethan repeated, and the word felt woefully inadequate for what he was feeling. He stood and moved around the fire to sit beside her. "Kora, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and in the firelight they glowed like molten gold. "These past weeks with you have been the best I have had in years," Ethan said. "You make me laugh, you challenge me. When I am with you, I feel like myself again, like the person I was before the war, not broken or haunted, just Ethan." He took her hand again, marveling at how natural it felt. "I do not want to lose that, I do not want to lose you. But we are so different," Kora whispered. "The world will not understand." "The world has been wrong about plenty of things," Ethan said. "It was wrong about the need for war. It is wrong about orcs being monsters. Maybe it is wrong about this too." "About what?" He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the strong lines of her jaw. "About whether a human and an orc can care for each other. About whether what I am feeling for you is impossible." Kora's breath caught. "What are you feeling?" "I think you know," Ethan said. "I think you have known for days now, just like I have known what you feel." "I am afraid," she admitted. "I have lost so much already. If I let myself care for you, truly care, and then lose you too, I do not think I could bear it." "You will not lose me," Ethan promised. "I am not going anywhere." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and exploratory, each of them learning the shape and taste of the other. Her tusks pressed lightly against his face, but Ethan found he liked the reminder of who she was, the beautiful differences between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kora was smiling. "That was nothing like I imagined." "You imagined kissing me?" Ethan asked, grinning. She laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "Perhaps once or twice, when I thought you were not looking." "I was looking," Ethan admitted, "more than I probably should have been." They kissed again, deeper this time, and when they finally settled for the night, it was together, wrapped in each other's arms. Ethan listened to Kora's breathing slow into sleep and felt a peace settle over him that he had not known was possible. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The next 3 days passed in a blur of travel and stolen moments. They held hands as they walked, kissed when they made camp, talked long into the nights about their hopes and fears. Ethan felt like a young man again, experiencing first love with all its intensity and wonder. The fact that the object of his affection was an orc woman seemed to matter less with each passing hour. On what should have been their last day of travel before reaching the settlements, disaster struck. They were following a narrow path along a ridgeline when Ethan heard a sound that made his blood run cold, the baying of hounds. He and Kora exchanged a look of pure terror. "The hunters," she said. "Run," Ethan commanded, grabbing her hand. They fled down the ridge, abandoning all attempts at stealth for speed. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, the hounds getting closer. Ethan's mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but the ridge had steep drops on either side with nowhere to hide. "There," Kora pointed ahead to where the ridge widened into a rocky outcropping. "We can make a stand there." It was not much, but it was better than being caught in the open. They reached the rocks and took position, Ethan drawing his knife while Kora hefted a sturdy branch she had picked up. Within minutes, the hunters emerged from the path behind them. There were 5 of them now, more than before. Garrick led them, his scarred face twisted in triumph. "Told you we would be watching," he called out. "And look what we found, a traitor and his pet orc." "Leave us alone," Ethan shouted back. "We have done nothing to you." "You lied to us," Garrick said, moving closer with his men spread out behind him. "Hid that creature, helped it escape. That is treason against your own kind." "The war is over," Ethan said desperately. "There are laws now. You cannot just hunt people." "That is not a person," one of the other hunters spat. "It is a monster, and you are a monster lover, which makes you just as bad." "I will go with them," Kora said quietly beside Ethan. "Let me go and they will leave you alone." "No," Ethan said firmly. "We stay together." "How touching," Garrick sneered. "The traitor and his orc together until the end. Well, we can arrange that. Kill them both, boys." The hunters moved forward and Ethan raised his knife, knowing it was hopeless but determined to fight anyway. He would not let them take Kora without a fight. He would die first. But before the hunters could reach them, a voice rang out from the rocks above. "That is far enough." Everyone froze, looking up to see a group of armed men and women positioned on the higher ground. There were at least 10 of them, a mix of humans and orcs, all carrying bows with arrows nocked and ready. At their head was a tall human woman with steel-gray hair and the bearing of a soldier. "Who the hell are you?" Garrick demanded. "I am Captain Vera Wells of the Border Patrol," the woman said crisply. "And you are in violation of about 7 different laws right now. Drop your weapons." "These are not your lands," Garrick protested. "Actually, as of 2 months ago, this entire region falls under Border Patrol jurisdiction," Wells said. "New treaty provisions. Now drop your weapons before I have my people shoot you for attempted murder." The hunters looked at each other uncertainly. The odds had shifted dramatically against them. Slowly, reluctantly, they lowered their weapons. "Smart choice," Wells said. She gestured and several of her patrol moved down to secure the hunters. She descended herself, approaching Ethan and Kora with sharp, assessing eyes. "You two all right?" "Yes," Ethan said, still trying to process their sudden rescue. "Thank you, Captain." "Do not thank me yet," Wells said. "You want to explain what this is all about." Ethan quickly recounted the story, from finding Kora injured in his cabin to their flight south. Wells listened without interruption, her expression giving nothing away. "So you are the one they have been hunting," she said to Kora when Ethan finished. "You have a name, Kora," she said, standing tall despite her obvious exhaustion. "Formerly of the Blackstone clan." "Blackstone." Wells looked interested. "They exiled you for speaking in favor of the peace," Kora confirmed. Wells nodded slowly. "We have heard about that clan. Hardliners resist the treaty at every turn. You are better off away from them." She turned back to Ethan. "And you are Ethan Sorenson." "Served in the 3rd Infantry," Ethan blinked in surprise. "Yes, how did you know?" "I make it my business to know about soldiers who served honorably," Wells said. "I also served, different unit, but I remember hearing about the 3rd. Good people." She looked between them and something in her expression softened. "You two are headed for the settlements." "That was the plan," Ethan said. "Good plan. We will escort you the rest of the way. It is only a few hours from here." Wells turned to her second in command, a massive orc man with intelligent eyes. "Get those hunters secured. We will take them to the settlement for trial." As the patrol organized themselves, Wells pulled Ethan and Kora aside. "I am going to give you both some advice," she said quietly. "What you two have, it is rare. Probably rarer than you realize. I have been working on these borders for 3 years, trying to make the peace stick, and I can count on one hand the number of human-orc relationships I have seen that looked genuine. Most people on both sides are still too full of hate. We know it will not be easy," Ethan said, taking Kora's hand. "Easy," Wells laughed. "It will be hell. People will judge you, insult you, maybe even threaten you. Both sides will call you traitors. But I have also seen what happens when people like you succeed. You become proof that the peace can work, that we can be more than our worst instincts." She gripped Ethan's shoulder. "Do not give up on each other. The world needs more people willing to bridge the divide." "We will not give up," Kora said firmly, and Ethan squeezed her hand in agreement. The journey to the settlement took only a few hours, as Wells had promised. It was called Bridgewater, built on both sides of a wide river that marked the border between what had been human and orc territories during the war. The town was unlike anywhere Ethan had been before, with humans and orcs living side by side, working together in markets and workshops. Wells brought them to the main administrative building, where she introduced them to the settlement's council, a mixed group of human and orc leaders. "We will process those hunters according to law," one of the council members, an elderly orc woman, assured them. "Hunting sentient beings is a serious crime under the treaty. They will face justice." "As for you two," said a human council member, a kind-faced man named Roland, "you are welcome to stay in Bridgewater as long as you like. We have housing available for newcomers and plenty of work if you are looking for it." "I am a farmer by trade," Ethan said, "and a medic if that is needed." "Both are valuable here," Roland said. "We are trying to expand our agricultural production, and healers are always in demand." "I am a hunter," Kora added, "and I can track, scout, and work leather." The elderly orc woman who introduced herself as Elder Mora smiled. "We can use those skills as well. Welcome to Bridgewater, both of you." They were given a small house on the human side of the river, though the designation seemed more historical than meaningful. Their neighbors were a mix of species, and while some gave them curious or suspicious looks, Most simply nodded in greeting and went about their business. That first night in their new home, Ethan and Kora stood on the small porch and looked out over the river, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Is this real?" Kora asked softly. "A place where we can just be together without hiding or running?" "It is real," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "This is our home now, our fresh start." She leaned back against him, and he felt her body relax in a way it never had before. For the first time since he had found her in his cabin, Kora was truly at peace. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work as they established their new life. Ethan found work easily, helping expand the settlement's farms while also serving as a part-time healer at the community clinic. Kora joined the settlement's hunting and scouting groups, her skills quickly earning respect from the other hunters, both human and orc. They faced challenges, of course. Some people made cruel comments or refused to do business with them. A few incidents of vandalism marred their house. But for every person who rejected them, two more seemed to accept or even support their relationship. The settlement had been founded on principles of cooperation and peace, and most of its residents took those principles seriously. 3 months after arriving in Bridgewater, as autumn began painting the trees in shades of gold and red, Ethan took Kora to a meadow outside the settlement. They had packed a picnic, and they spent the afternoon lying in the grass, talking and laughing as the sun slowly descended. "I have been thinking," Ethan said as they watched clouds drift overhead. "Dangerous pastime," Kora teased. He nudged her playfully. "I am serious. I have been thinking about the future, our future." Kora rolled onto her side to face him, her amber eyes curious. "What about it?" "When I was growing up, I always imagined I would have a farm someday," Ethan said. "A family. That all seemed impossible after the war. I thought I was too broken, too haunted by what I had done. But with you, I feel whole again. You have given me hope for things I thought were lost forever." "Ethan," Kora whispered, seeing where he was going. He sat up and took her hands in his. "I know we are already living together. I know we have already committed to each other in every way that matters. But I want to make it official. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." He swallowed hard, suddenly nervous. "Kora, will you marry me?" Tears immediately began streaming down her face. "You want to marry me? An orc?" "I want to marry you, the woman I love," Ethan corrected gently. "The fact that you are an orc is just part of who you are, and I love all of you. So what do you say?" "Yes," Kora said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed there in the meadow, sealing their promise to each other as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, Ethan pulled something from his pocket. "I made this," he said, showing her a ring carved from wood and inlaid with small green stones he had collected from the river. "It is not much, but it is perfect," Kora interrupted, slipping it onto her finger. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." They married a month later in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions. Elder Mora officiated, speaking about the importance of bridges between peoples, of love that transcends old hatreds. Captain Wells attended, along with most of the settlement and even some folks from the surrounding area who had heard about the wedding and wanted to witness this symbol of the peace. Ethan's hands shook as he said his vows, promising to love and protect Kora for all his days. Kora's voice was strong and clear as she made her own promises, speaking in both common and her native orcish tongue. When they kissed to seal their union, the crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very earth. The celebration lasted long into the night, with food and music and dancing. Ethan found himself overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, by the number of people who came to wish them well. It seemed impossible that, just months ago, he had been alone in his cabin, running from his past. Now he had a wife, a community, a future full of possibilities. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, an orc man approached them hesitantly. He was young, barely into adulthood, and his eyes were filled with uncertainty. "Kora," he said quietly. Kora turned, and Ethan saw shock cross her face. "Thrak, my brother," the young orc nodded, and suddenly they were embracing, both talking rapidly in Orcish. Ethan stood back, giving them their moment until Kora turned to him with tear-streaked cheeks. "Ethan, this is Thrak, my youngest brother," she said. "He says he left the clan. He came looking for me." "It is good to meet you," Ethan said, offering his hand. After a moment, Thrak took it. "I heard you married a human," Thrak said, his accent thick. "I did not believe it, but seeing you together, the way you look at each other, I understand now." "Why did you leave the clan?" Kora asked. "After you were exiled, things got worse," Thrak explained. "The elders became more extreme, talking about breaking the treaty, starting the war again. Our other brothers agreed, but I could not. I remembered what you said about the cost of war, about the need for peace, so I left too. I have been searching for you for months." "You are welcome here," Ethan said immediately. "We have a home now and room for family." Thrak looked at him with something like wonder. "You would accept me? An orc and a stranger?" "You are not a stranger," Ethan said. "You are Kora's brother, which makes you my brother now." That is how family works. The next months were filled with continued growth and change. Thrak settled into the community, finding work with a blacksmith and slowly learning to navigate this new world of cooperation between species. More orc refugees arrived, fleeing clans that rejected the peace, and each one was welcomed and integrated into the settlement. Ethan and Kora's relationship became something of a symbol for Bridgewater, proof that the divide between humans and orcs could be overcome. They did not ask for that role, but they accepted it, understanding the importance of their example. When younger couples, mixed species or otherwise, came to them for advice, they shared their story honestly, including the difficulties they had faced. A year after their wedding, Kora came to Ethan in the fields where he was working, her face glowing with excitement and something else he could not quite read. "I need to tell you something," she said, taking his hands. "What is it?" Ethan asked, concerned by her serious tone. "I am pregnant," Kora said, and watched his face carefully. "We are going to have a child." For a moment, Ethan could not process the words. Then understanding crashed over him like a wave, and he let out a whoop of joy that startled the workers in the nearby fields. He picked Kora up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "We are having a baby," he said, setting her down gently and touching her face. "A baby, Kora, our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction had made the answer clear. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ethan said. "I am terrified and thrilled and overwhelmed and so completely in love with you that I can barely think straight." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and Ethan felt his heart expand with a joy so intense it was almost painful. They were going to be parents. They were going to bring a new life into this world, a child who would be both human and orc, a living symbol of the bridge they had built. The pregnancy was not easy. Kora's body handled the mixing of species with some difficulty, and there were days when she was too sick to leave bed. Ethan cared for her tirelessly, drawing on his medical knowledge and the advice of the settlement's healers. The entire community seemed invested in the pregnancy, with neighbors bringing food and Elder Mora visiting regularly to check on Kora's health. "This child will be important," Mora said one day, her old eyes wise. "Not just to you, but to all of us. Proof that our peoples can create life together, not just share space." "That is a lot of pressure for a baby," Ethan said, worried. "The child will handle it," Mora assured him. With parents like you too, how could they not? When Kora went into labor on a cold winter night, Ethan was beside himself with worry. The birth took hours, and he held her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement even as his own fear threatened to overwhelm him. Finally, as dawn was breaking, their daughter entered the world with a strong, healthy cry. She was perfect. She had Kora's green-tinted skin, though lighter than her mother's, and Ethan's brown eyes. Tiny tusks were just visible at her gums, and her ears came to subtle points. She was a beautiful blend of both her parents, and when the healer placed her in Kora's arms, Ethan felt tears streaming down his face. "She is beautiful," he whispered. "She is perfect." "What should we name her?" Kora asked, exhausted but glowing with happiness. They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at his daughter's face, Ethan knew exactly what her name should be. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope." Kora smiled through her own tears. "Hope Sorenson. It is perfect." News of Hope's birth spread quickly through the settlement and beyond. People came from all over to see the first child born of a human-orc union in the region. Some came out of curiosity, others out of genuine joy, but all seemed to recognize the significance of her existence. Captain Wells visited a week after the birth, bringing gifts and congratulations. "She is going to change the world," Wells said, gently touching Hope's tiny hand. "Just by existing, she proves what is possible." "She is just a baby," Kora said protectively. "Right now, yes," Wells agreed. "But she is also a symbol, whether you want her to be or not. She is proof that our peoples can come together in the most fundamental way. That matters." As Hope grew, it became clear she had inherited the best qualities of both her parents. She was strong and quick like her mother, but also gentle and curious like her father. The settlement embraced her completely, with neighbors from both species doting on her and watching her development with pride. Ethan and Kora raised her to understand both sides of her heritage, teaching her human customs and orc traditions. They told her stories of both peoples, the good and the bad, helping her understand the complex history that had led to her existence. Most importantly, they taught her that love was stronger than hate, that peace was worth fighting for, and that she should never be ashamed of who she was. 3 years after Hope's birth, Ethan and Kora stood on the same meadow where he had proposed, watching their daughter chase butterflies through the grass. Thrak was with them, having married a human woman himself, and now with a child on the way. The settlement had grown substantially, with more mixed couples and families emerging each year. "You ever think about that night I found you?" Ethan asked, taking Kora's hand. "All the time," she admitted. "I was so afraid that night, so certain my life was over. And then you showed me kindness when you had every reason not to. You saved me, Ethan." "We saved each other," Ethan corrected. "You gave me something to believe in, something to fight for. You made me remember who I wanted to be." Hope ran up to them, clutching a flower she had picked. "Look, Mama, Papa, pretty, very pretty," Kora said, accepting the flower and tucking it behind her ear. "Just like you." Hope giggled and ran off again, her laughter bright and pure. Ethan watched her go, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," he admitted quietly. "For something to go wrong, for someone to try to take this away from us." "That might happen," Kora said honestly. "There are still those who hate what we represent. But we will face it together, just like we have faced everything else. Together." "Together," Ethan agreed, kissing her softly. Over the years that followed, their life continued to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. The farm Ethan had always dreamed of became a reality, with Kora's hunting providing game that they sold at market alongside their crops. Thrak became a master blacksmith, his work prized throughout the region. Hope grew into a bright, confident child who moved easily between both halves of her heritage. More children were born to mixed couples in Bridgewater and the surrounding settlements. The sight of green-skinned children playing with human ones became so common that people stopped commenting on it. The peace that had seemed so fragile when Ethan first found Kora hiding in his cabin grew stronger with each passing season. There were still challenges, of course. Some of the old orc clans remained hostile, and there were human towns that refused to accept the treaty. Occasional violence flared, and each incident reminded them that the peace was still young and vulnerable. But Bridgewater stood as proof that cooperation was possible, and gradually, more settlements followed their model. Captain Wells was promoted to regional commander, overseeing peacekeeping efforts across a vast territory. She often visited Bridgewater, calling it her favorite example of what the peace could achieve. She became something like an aunt to Hope and the other mixed children, bringing them gifts and telling them stories of the world beyond their borders. Elder Mora lived to see her 98th year, long enough to witness the birth of Hope's first sibling, a son they named Thomas after Ethan's father. She held the baby in her wrinkled hands and smiled. "The future is bright," she said softly. "We have built something that will last." She died peacefully in her sleep that same week, and the entire settlement mourned her loss. But her words proved prophetic. The relationships and community she had helped foster continued to grow stronger. On the 10th anniversary of finding Kora in his cabin, Ethan organized a surprise for his wife. He arranged for them to travel back to the mountains, to the old cabin where their story had begun. The journey took several days, and they brought Hope and Thomas with them, now 6 and 4 years old respectively. The cabin was still there, weathered but standing. Ethan had arranged for it to be maintained over the years, unable to completely let go of the place where his life had changed. They spent 3 days there, showing the children where their parents had first met, telling them the story of those early days. "You were really scared of Papa?" Hope asked Kora, as if she couldn't imagine her strong mother being frightened of anything. "I was terrified," Kora admitted. "I thought he might hurt me. Instead, he showed me more kindness than I had known in years." "And you were hurt?" Thomas asked, always interested in his father's medical stories. "Very hurt," Kora confirmed, showing him the scar that still marked her ribs. "Your father patched me up and took care of me, even though he did not know me at all." "Why?" Hope asked. "Because it was the right thing to do," Ethan said, pulling his daughter into his lap. "And because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose kindness over fear." On their last night at the cabin, after the children had fallen asleep, Ethan and Kora sat outside under the stars, much as they had done so many times before. "I never imagined this," Kora said softly. "This life, this happiness. When my clan exiled me, I thought I had lost everything. I thought I would die alone and unmourned. Instead, you found a family," Ethan said. "You found a home." "I found you," she corrected, turning to kiss him. "Everything else came from that." They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead. Two people from different worlds who had built a bridge between them out of courage and love. Their story had become legend in the settlements, told to children as an example of what was possible when people chose hope over hate. Years continued to pass. Hope grew into a young woman, strong and wise beyond her years, and eventually chose to join the border patrol like Captain Wells. Thomas became a healer like his father, with plans to open a clinic that would serve both human and orc communities. More children followed, each one a miracle, each one proof that love could transcend any divide. Ethan and Kora grew old together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing, but their love never diminishing. They watched as Bridgewater expanded from a small settlement into a thriving city, the model for dozens of similar communities across the region. The peace they had helped build, simply by choosing to love each other, had transformed the world. On the 50th anniversary of the day, Ethan had found Kora in his cabin. The city held a celebration in their honor. They were old now, Ethan's hair completely white and Kora's frame bent with age, but they stood before the crowd with quiet dignity as the mayor spoke of their contribution to the peace. "These two people," the mayor said, gesturing to them, "they did not set out to change the world. They simply chose to see each other as people, not enemies. They chose love over fear, hope over hate, and in doing so they showed us all a better way forward." The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan felt Kora's hand squeeze his. He looked at her and saw the same amber eyes that had first caught his attention all those years ago, still bright with intelligence and love despite the years. "No regrets," he whispered to her. "Not a single one," she whispered back. "You." "Only that I cannot live it all over again," Ethan said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. That night, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, including several who bore the same beautiful blend of human and orc features that had first appeared in Hope, Ethan and Kora sat on their porch and watched the sunset paint the sky. "We did it," Kora said softly. "We built something real. Something that will last." "We did," Ethan agreed. "Together." "Always together," Kora said, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat like that as darkness fell, two old souls who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that had changed the world. Around them, their family laughed and talked, living proof that the divide between peoples could be bridged, that peace was possible, that love really could conquer hate. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Ethan thought back to that stormy night so many years ago, when he had opened the door of his cabin to find a pair of glowing amber eyes staring back at him from the darkness. He had been afraid then, uncertain. But he had chosen kindness, and that single choice had led to all of this: a family, a community, a legacy of peace. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" Kora asked. "For hiding in my cabin that night," Ethan said. "For giving me a chance to be brave, for loving me back." "I should be thanking you," Kora said. "You risked everything to keep me safe. You gave up your home, your peaceful life, everything just to protect me." "Best decision I ever made," Ethan said firmly. They kissed, soft and sweet, a gesture they had shared thousands of times over the decades but which never lost its significance. When they broke apart, Hope was standing in the doorway, smiling at them. "You two are disgustingly romantic, you know that?" she teased. "Good," Kora said. "We taught you well." Hope laughed and came to sit with them, and soon the other children and grandchildren joined, crowding onto the porch until there was barely room to move. But no one complained. They were together, family in every sense that mattered, proof that love could indeed transcend any boundary. As the evening deepened into night, Ethan looked around at the faces of his family, each one precious beyond words. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from that lonely soldier returning from war to this content old man surrounded by love. Every choice, every moment of courage or kindness, had led to this. And it had all started with a woman hiding in his cabin, afraid and alone, who had been brave enough to accept help from a stranger who should have been her enemy. They had taken a chance on each other, and in doing so, had proven that the future did not have to be bound by the past. The war was truly over now, not just on paper but in hearts and minds. Their grandchildren would grow up in a world where human-orc relationships were unremarkable, where the old hatreds were distant history. That world had been bought with courage and sacrifice, but also with simple, stubborn love. Ethan took Kora's hand one more time, their fingers interlocking with the ease of long practice. She smiled at him, and in that smile he saw everything. Their past, their present, their future carried on in their descendants. "I love you," he said, words he had spoken 10,000 times but which still felt new. "I love you too," Kora replied. "Today, tomorrow, forever." As stars filled the sky above their home, the family sat together in comfortable companionship, living proof that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest act of kindness. Ethan had found an orc woman hiding in his cabin, and he had risked everything to keep her safe. In return, she had given him a life richer and fuller than he had ever imagined possible. It was, they both agreed, a fair trade. More than fair. It was everything. And so they lived on. Two people who had bridged a divide and built a family that spanned two worlds, their love a beacon of hope that would shine long after they were gone. Their story would be told for generations, a reminder that peace was always possible, that love could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply opening your heart to someone different from yourself. The night deepened, the family eventually drifting inside one by one, but Ethan and Kora remained on the porch, hands linked, watching the stars. They had traveled so far from that stormy night in the mountains, and yet in many ways they had never left. The essence of what they had found, their trust, hope, love, had sustained them through everything that followed. "Ready for bed?" Kora finally asked. "In a moment," Ethan said. "I just want to sit here with you a little longer." So they sat, two souls intertwined by choice and circumstance, and watched the night sky turn overhead. Somewhere in the darkness, other people were making their own choices about fear and love, war and peace. Ethan and Kora's story was just one among many, but it mattered. Every act of kindness mattered. Every choice to see the humanity in another person. Every bridge built between divided peoples. They had started with nothing but a wounded woman and a man willing to help. They had built a world. And that, Ethan thought as he finally stood and helped Kora to her feet, was the greatest adventure of all. Not the dramatic moments or the grand gestures, but the quiet decision, repeated every day for 50 years, to choose love, to choose each other, to choose hope. Hand in hand, they went inside to join their family, to sleep in the home they had built together, to wake tomorrow and choose each other all over again, just as they always had, just as they always would, for whatever time remained to them. Their story was ending, as all stories must. But what they had begun would continue, carried forward by their children and grandchildren, spreading outward in ripples that would touch lives they would never meet. That was legacy. That was love. That was everything. The door closed behind them, warm light spilling out into the night for just a moment before the darkness reclaimed it. But the light remained, held in hearts and memories, in children who existed because two people had been brave enough to love across a divide. Ethan Sorenson had found an orc woman hiding in his abandoned cabin. He had risked everything to keep her safe. And in doing so, he had found everything that truly mattered. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.